Apologies. So real quickly, today covering an overview of the field certification program. Wanted to provide kind of early insight into that, give you an update of where things stand, and then answer any questions that you might have. Things are very, very much still a work in progress. So we're sharing this kind of early draft for the purpose of soliciting input. So let me share my screen. So for starters, why are we even talking about a field certification program? This was a key thing in talking with McBee of looking at, where he wants the organization to continue to mature and evolve. It's around continuing to be efficient and predictable. And the way to do that is to look at, how you've seen some of the work that Eric Brown has been leading around documenting sales operating procedures. That will continue to evolve and iterate as we look at both understanding the process now for enterprise sales and commercial sales, and to have a more consistent way that we go about executing across the customer journey. And so really with the certification program, it's the opportunity to say, let's validate the proficiency level in our team members' ability to execute against those critical moments that matter across the customer journey. So that's really the why. So as your roles as sales managers, we look to your help and support to champion this effort of saying, this isn't about critiquing sales reps. This isn't about, big brother or a stick approach. This is really about us pursuing excellence as a field organization, to be more predictable, to be more consistent in how we execute. I do want to share that that we will continue to execute against prioritized enablement initiatives and activities that prior to the launch of the certification program. So it's not that we're going, you won't see other things being executed based on what you are sharing with us as training and enablement needs to close some of the knowledge and or skill gaps that you see with your teams. The launch of the field certification program, we know that our tools need to evolve. Google Classroom, it has some limitations. It's helped us get to where we are today, but to really provide a fun and engaging and compelling user experience, it's got to be something other than Google Classroom. The good news is that there's been a project for multiple quarters. I think I have more gray hairs and white hairs as a result of it, but to get cross-functional alignment to roll out a learning experience platform, which is essentially a new age LMS, the learning experience platform across how we train and educate customers, partners, and internal team members. This will not replace our approach to being handbook first. Handbook will continue to serve as the single source of truth, but this new learning experience platform, again, will provide a much better learner-centric experience that is going to make learning more fun and engaging. The downside is that the launch of that learning experience platform has been delayed due to contract negotiations and internal processes to get everybody aligned all the way up to Sid and Paul and McBee, et cetera. So currently, the timeline for launching that learning experience platform is soft launch in October with a hard launch in early November. So that, and when we feel it's super important that we launch a certification program with the best user experience. If we launch this on Google Classroom, it would just, our belief, fall flat on its face because the user experience isn't there. So one of the things we wanted to share today is that Q3 will continue to execute against prioritized learning objectives. I know Eric and Kelly and others are sharing those plans with the leadership teams now so that you've got a view into what are the things that we're executing in Q3. And then for the launch of Q4, we aren't going to launch an entire certification program. We're going to launch the first elements of it. And so that's what we'll share today. What we've prioritized for each of the roles. For commercial, we're going to certify on the required 7. For enterprise sales, it's really focusing on certification against pipeline generation and qualification. And we'll talk about what that means in just a moment. And then I won't read the rest of the slides, but you can see SAs and TAMs. We're picking places to start so that we're not trying to boil the ocean. But this is going to be a rollout over the course of several quarters, because it's not, when we think about consumption capacity, there's no way we're expecting or even wanting to try to have folks go through training and get certified on every aspect of the customer journey. So this is going to be a modular approach over several quarters. The components of the certification program are aligned to these, what we're calling these moments that matter. And moments that matter is an inspiration from a book around sales best practice, sales enablement best practices, of really looking at driving customer centricity into your organization by looking at by looking at, like, what are really the things that a sales team really needs to execute cleanly and well against to delight the customer. So it's for each of these critical moments that matter, which I'll show. That's actually going to be the next slide. With each moment that matter, we want to look at what's the process, what is the content, what are the tools, what are the skills and behaviors that a team member, whether it's a SAL, an AE, a TAM, or an SA, needs to execute very well to delight that customer. And that's what we want to assess against to get certified, is to validate that they can do those things well. Let me, and then I'll speak briefly here, and then I'll take a pause. These are, so the team has been working closely with delegates from every organization to really understand and kind of define what are these key moments that matter. So I'll just pick a couple. When we talk about discovery calls, again, what are all the process, the knowledge that you need to have, the specific behaviors to plan for a good discovery call, to execute a good discovery call, and to follow up from those discovery calls to put the seller in the best position to be the preferred vendor and to navigate through that sales process. So that's really the approach. As you see here, what are the responsibilities of the SAL or AE versus when you start to get to, all right, later in the stage, I'll just pick deliver the demo. We want to make sure that we define, what does excellence look like? When we talk about an SA delivering that demo, what are the things they need to do to prepare to deliver it, and then following up from it. So let me pause here. There's a lot of detail on this slide, but any questions or reactions so far? All right, my team, anything that you would like to add that I have not addressed so far?
Hey, Summers, it's Ideker real quick. What does loosen the status quo mean as a phrase?
Yeah, great question. And this is from some Forrester Serious Decisions logic. It's essentially the biggest competitor is no decision. So to loosen the status quo, you need to first help the customer realize that there's a need for change, right? That continuing to do something that they've always done is not going to get them there. So from a command of the message parlance, it's tell me your current state, where's your future state, and then understanding the delta and really building up that sense of urgency about the need to change. So it's that awareness and recognition that we've got a problem. They may, in some instances, they know they have a problem. In other instances, it's on us as trusted advisors to help them realize that they have a challenge, like that not having visibility to all aspects of the software development lifecycle is inhibiting their productivity, right? Is making them less efficient. They may not know that until we educate them on that. Does that help?
Yes, thanks.
Thanks. Great question.
Just to follow on from that, could we maybe look at that phrasing? Because obviously you've just had to explain what it means. So it's obviously not immediately obvious. And also we've got non-native English speakers in our sales team, and that may just confuse them.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. Yeah, we can either define it or look at changing the language. Yeah, thank you. And I think the team is helping to take notes. So thank you for that, Helen. Just real briefly, I think one of the critical things as we look at, as we're rolling out, when we do get closer to in Q3 and start to socialize this, it's going to be critical that we have a fully fleshed out change management plan. I don't want to go into details here, but just a high level overview for those of you not familiar with this ProSci ADKAR model. There's a science to change, right? Are folks aware of what is changing and the need for change? Most important, or perhaps most importantly, do they want it? What's the WIFM? We're going to spend a lot of time, and we welcome feedback from you all of, we don't want, it's imperative that we do this in partnership so that the sales team sees that this is something that's good for them, for their development, to help them meet and exceed their quota, just to be more successful in their role. We want them, so part of our challenge and responsibility, and again, in partnership with you all, is to make this something that folks want to do, not something that we're making them do. So it goes back to when we started off, why are we doing this? This is to improve predictability. This is to improve our efficiency. And we're gonna need your help from a change management perspective of, if it's just field enablement communicating this, it's not gonna work. So we want your feedback so that you buy into this as well and help us figure out the best way that collectively we position this in the right way. We won't get into those details today, but welcome feedback throughout of figuring out when we do have a draft change management plan. We'll be following back up probably on this forum to solicit some more input. Once you establish the awareness of the need for change and that really nailed down the WIFM for each of the individuals, so we need to think about not only the WIFM for the individual contributors, but frankly, continue to work on the WIFM for you all, right? So that you're bought into this as well. But then it's do they have the requisite knowledge and requisite ability? That's really what the training is about, the knowledge, but the ability is about, and a huge emphasis that you'll see is incorporating this in their day-to-day. So we don't want this to be taking people away from selling. We want this to be a lightweight e-learning that transfers knowledge, but then the application exercise is something that they're doing just in the course of their day-to-day responsibilities. And we need your help as ASMs to then validate, right, assess their proficiency in demonstrating those things on the job. So here's some assumptions. This is maybe one of the things that is still fluid. All this is fluid, but particularly fluid where we want feedback. Our assumptions are that there will be an expectation when the certification launches. And so we need some feedback on the timing. But the idea is that on a weekly, or maybe it's a 2-week block, where you look at, there's a brief micro learning. So we want to keep these short and sweet. So a 30-minute e-learning that, and then with an application exercise to say, all right, now that you have the basic micro learning, now your task is to go demonstrate this on the job, and to have your manager assess whether or not you have accomplished that proficiency. So we'll have rubrics and things like that to assist you in basically saying, yes, this person is at the proficiency level we need them to be for this particular skill or this particular behavior. Or you can provide them coaching if they haven't met that proficiency level until they have mastered that particular concept. So we're looking for frontline managers to support this through your just regular one-on-one coaching, and you'll have a specific focus on that particular topic. So for that week or those couple of weeks, whatever that focus is to assess them and say, all right, either they're certified or they still have some work to do in that area. Let me pause here. Questions or comments on this?
Yeah, David, this is Hayden, by the way. It's more of a high level question, but when I think about what it is we're actually getting trained and certified on. So if I think about command of the message, we could explain that to, say, a new hire as, hey, this is our sales methodology here at GitLab. You're going to learn it. You're going to get certified on it. That's bucket number one. What are we calling this? Is this, we're going to certify you on the GitLab sales operating procedure?
Yeah, good question. I hadn't thought about what we call it other than just saying, of certifying against the moments that matter. So for example, so I like that. We'll continue to think about that, but I like that, Hayden, of, I think that what we call it is going to be critically important. But yes, in general, what we're looking to do is to take the customer journey, break it into pieces so that we certify against essentially that sales. I think it's the sales operating procedure. I think something like that. I don't know if those are the exact words, but that's the spirit.
Yeah, if I look at the handbook, the handbook page is the sales operating procedures, and then we go into the four big aspects of it. And I noticed on one of the previous slides, I like the addition of there's the seller journey, which I was familiar with, and now that we've got the customer journey, which is break the status quo, which I knew exactly what that meant, or loosen the status quo. So I like the addition of that, the customer journey. So I don't think we could say, hey, we're going to certify you and train you on the customer journey, because it's also a seller journey. So maybe it is the sales operating procedure as the big catch-all. Hey, this is what we're going to certify you and enable you on.
A great point.
Just a thought. Sure.
Yeah, I like that. And I think that does align to how we've structured it. So I think that works. I think that plays well. One of the things that we'll be sure to get more feedback on is this. We know that training consumption capacity is a real thing that we need to partner with you on, of figuring out, like, again, we don't want this to take away from or distract from selling. This should augment and help us. We got to continue to execute against, quotas and the results. That's first and foremost. But in terms of getting to predictability and getting to efficiency, it's how do we assess and do certification in concert with that. So finding that balance is not an easy exercise, but we'll definitely in the coming weeks, months, etc., provide more detail of, hey, what does this actually mean in terms of a time commitment for weeks when we look at it like that. So don't have all that detail now, but just know that we're committed to partnering with you to figure out what is the right balance. This is some of the feedback that we have received. For those that we've socialized this, we've gotten feedback from a number of you to help inform what are the learning objectives for each of the components, what are the components. So I'll touch upon the top left. Hey, this should focus on behaviors, skills, process, and tools, but we shouldn't try to boil the ocean and train them on everything, just some of the most critical things. So we agree. You'll see that this isn't meant to be a panacea of everything. So there will still be a need to do other ongoing training and enablement for a myriad of different things that are outside of the scope of certifying against, as Hayden mentioned, the sales operating procedures. Boston said, hey, we need to be really clear. Oh, this one. We just talked about this being, we want to make sure this isn't too onerous. You have our commitment to do our best to figure out what this looks like so that we deliver micro learnings, again, small time commitment from an e-learning away from selling, but it's really focused on the job application to validate that they are in fact demonstrating the desired proficiencies. And then being really clear and crisp. So yeah, we're going to only focus for each role what is most relevant. So I'm not going to cover all these slides, but I want to give just a snapshot of some of how we're approaching this. All right, so immediate reaction. This is, first off, this is a year worth of experiences. This is not going to all roll out at once. What we're focused on now is the first certification will be, and this, to your point, Hayden, we're couching this in terms of that language of the sales process, Well, we're going to focus first on how will we certify the sales team on the sales on educating and engaging the customer. And then based on your input, Eric has broken this down into a few of the key concepts of engaging and educating the customer. If you'd like additional detail here, I'm not going to go into the weeds today, but definitely follow, either reach out to Eric will reach out to you all in the coming weeks to continue to socialize more of the details behind this. But again, we'll share. So an idea of how this may roll out is, so I mentioned earlier, we're targeting a Q4 rollout. For example, it could be the first 2 weeks, we focus on a micro learning on applying DevOps. And in particular, this is about what are the right questions to ask to ascertain which use case or use cases may be most relevant to consider positioning based on the customer needs. So it's really helping that, of applying the ability to understand the use cases, ask the right questions, and then figure out kind of which direction to go. And so this certification is basically saying, hey, your teams, can you validate that they are competent and comfortable in doing that? Then maybe, in another couple of weeks, there'll be a 30-minute micro learning on the customer journey with an application exercise on the job to validate the proficiency there. So this will, roll out over the course of multiple quarters, but looking at this in a very modular, iterative approach so that it's not like overwhelming or too much all at once. But anyway, but I did think it was important. We felt it was important to share kind of the big picture of how does all this stuff ultimately fit together. Today, when new hires go through Sales Quick Start, a lot of this is just knowledge transfer. Right? There is so much that we expect our sales team to know and be able to do that, and we don't want them in onboarding training forever. The onboarding is already quite intense, but most of this is just knowledge transfer. We don't actually test or assess whether or not they can do it. In today's world, they go through Sales Quick Start, and honestly, they kind of fall off of a cliff. And there's an incredible burden on you all as ASMs to then coach them and train them on executing against the sales process and all the skills and the knowledge they need to have. What we're hoping to do here is, again, not over-engineer this thing and have too much training, but to have a little bit of a prescriptive journey that says, okay, great, we've transferred knowledge. You do, when you exit Sales Quick Start, we do have, you are applying you're demonstrating your skill to lead an effective discovery call. But then how do we start to layer onto that of, all right, well, so all these other pieces iteratively over time, let's assess their ability as they continue their ramp and their onboarding journey, making sure that they move from kind of that knowledge to mastery of each of these, all the skills and behaviors they need to be able to execute against throughout the sales process. Let me pause here. Questions or reactions?
Hey, David, Jim, Riley, a lot of great content. I guess this slide, you're kind of showing the functional learning path, correct?
Correct.
How would you envision a timeline learning path? Is it functions at a time, or is it a different approach? Because I'm just trying to get my head around, I think we're not saying there's engagement with the sellers with the LDS or LMS until November. So all this is just heads up, this is coming at us, correct?
Correct. So for in November, for example, we'd had a couple weeks where we'd focus on one of these modules. A couple weeks later, focus on the next module, to where over the course of a quarter, perhaps a little bit more than a quarter, TBD on the exact timing, once the SAL completes these, then they become they're certified on this aspect of the sales process. They become a GitLab certified strategic account leader after they complete, all of these elements. But again, that's over a broad timeline. Does that answer your question or no?
It did. Then follow-on question, the account planning in the next column. I thought I saw something about a new technology coming in August. Or are we going to be able to start to leverage the account planning best practices earlier than November?
Absolutely. So going back to just to reemphasize this point of, sorry, I thought this was a couple, I want to, sorry. We will continue to execute, prioritize training before and even during the certification process. So yeah, things like, hey, my team needs to know about this new account planning tool on the enterprise side. There will be training for that. There's been interest expressed for some teams of a command of the message refresher. So we're not going to wait for the certification is really about validating the proficiency to help us get to that predictability and efficiency. But there will be a parallel path of there will still be some things that you are requesting, some training enablement that will happen concurrently. But we will need to look at, though, when this does launch, again, back to that training consumption capacity, we'll need to be very deliberate about, hey, if we're asking our teams to participate in these little 2-week certification elements, that may mean that we deprioritize and not do other training pieces. We will make sure we're having that dialogue proactively with leadership. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So we're almost at time. The last couple of things I will share is, so in this deck, you'll see that also there's a little bit more granularity of, hey, when we talk about applying DevOps, some of these, what are some of the learning objectives? What will someone be able to do? What are we looking to confirm their proficiency? Is like, can they do these things? And we'll make sure that the learning applies to that. And then the assessment, you'll help to validate those proficiencies are based on these specific learning objectives. The last thing I wanted to share is that each role may have a slightly different learning path. I shared earlier for commercial sales, Ryan's been very helpful to say, look, the most important thing for the commercial right now is that everybody's operating efficiently with required 7. So for commercial, before we approach a certification based on the sales operating procedures, the focus for second half for commercial is really certifying against the required 7. So those in commercial know what I'm talking about. Enterprise, all you need to know is like the AEs are maybe going through a little bit of a different experience. Likewise, when you think about TAMs, for example, SAs, their first certification is going to be this demo to win. And so it's based on things like, hey, what does a good technical discovery look like? And then what does the SA need to do for prepping for and then delivering that demo? So we're definitely taking a role-based approach to this. And that, again, that certification path is a little bit different based on your role. But I know we don't have SAs and TAMs on today's call, so I didn't want to over-index here. Thank you so much for the time. I hope this was helpful to at least begin to bring some awareness of what this is and what's coming. We've got several months, so we welcome to continue the dialogue and solicit your input. If you got any feedback, please reach out. Thank you all.